Oh, there's risk, but the reward is a reborn city. The little city of Oneonta in upstate New York is saying no to the demographic shift. We aim to reverse the trend line, to bring 1,000 new neighbors into our city, to energize our historic downtown, to recapture the magic of the last century when Oneonta was a place to make memories and launch dreams. 1,000 new neighbors joining our community and adding to our quality of life. To bring them here, we'll take a blitz of promotion and connection, and we'll take the efforts of hundreds of us working together. But if we pull this off, we'll all win. This is the Hill City Gambit. I'm the mayor, Mark Drenick, and we've got a story to tell.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to learn more and support Oneonta and our efforts in bringing 1,000 new residents to our little city, visit us at exploreoneonta.com. That's exploreoneonta.com.
Well, this is Mark Drenick, mayor of the city of Oneonta, and I'm here with Stephen Yerly, code enforcement officer, and with Judy Pangman, Oneonta's director of community development. Steve heads the planning and development department here in the city.
Hey, Mark, thanks.
Let's start off with the question for those who don't know you. How long have you been in the city, and what was it that brought you to us?
So I have lived in the city as a resident for about 3 years now. I've lived adjacent to the city for 10 before that. Originally, I moved upstate New York from a much more citied area. I moved from Washington, D.C. I chose upstate New York because I liked kind of the more rural aspects of upstate New York, and I got a job in the city, and I started realizing that commuting in the winter was not the best of times, even at the best of times, and decided to make the move into Oneonta because it's got a lot of amenities, it's walkable, it's kind of all the things that I really loved about DC, minus some of the congestion. So it's got a nice small town, just a generally good feeling. It's like a kind of a Norman Rockwell, like a nice little place to live. Your neighbors, it's just a great quality of life.
Yeah. You've heard the podcast, so you know what it is that we're talking about. We're trying to bring 1,000 people in here. We, in fact, have had some success with that, which is great. But the gambit in the Hill City Gambit is that we're going to have housing for them when they get here. And that said, I want to talk about the current predicament that we're dealing with, that you're dealing with, and the changes that we might be strategizing around zoning that could have an impact on our housing situation in the long term.
I could give you like a multi-hour discussion about zoning, but I'm going to save everyone that. So the city of Oneonta, like many communities, was zoned using what we call Euclidean zoning, which was really, really interested in separating uses of land by type. And one of the main types of zoning in America is single-family housing. So when we look at neighborhoods in Oneonta, a lot of them are zoned. Most of the land mass in Oneonta is actually zoned for specifically just single-family housing. Historically, Oneonta was not full of single-family housing. So that's definitely a creation of like a post-war kind of suburban concept of how we should zone and use land. So what we're looking at and what kind of the planning community and what we consider like best practices in zoning now is creating a place that's more like what Oneonta was when it was built. So for example, on my street, we have single family houses, we have 3-family houses, we have 2-family houses, we even have 1 4-family house. And the beauty of that is you then have some houses that people, if they want to live in a single family home, can live in. And maybe you have a retired couple that doesn't need 3,000 square foot house, or maybe you have a single family that wants to have, a duplex building that they can rent one side and pay their mortgage with it. So by providing all that flexibility and providing all those types of housing options, you not only increase the housing stock, but you lower the cost of rent because you increase the availability of housing. And you also mix the community of who's living there. So you might have retired people, young families, people with kids, people without kids. So that kind of creates that like vibrant, dense, busy, active community that everyone kind of wants to live in. So when we start looking at the zoning, that's what we're looking at. We're like, how do we add those options? How do we add what they call right now the missing middle housing, that stuff that's kind of between the single family home model and the apartment complex model.
So can you talk a little bit about the housing stock? You mentioned Oneonta's been here now for a very long time, but it's gone through its changes. In these last 75 years or so, certainly it went through some changes. What does the housing stock in Oneonta, generally speaking, look like?
Yeah, so what we see in Oneonta historically has been a mix of single family to kind of like flat buildings. So a great example, there's a street called Galt Street. It's mostly single family homes. And then in the middle of that, there's like a 3-story kind of like classic like flat building, like a tenement building. That street is currently zoned for single family housing only, despite there being a probably 150-year-old tenement house on it. It's because of the past land uses in Oneonta. Like we have the railroad, we have the normal school, we now have SUNY Oneonta, Hartwick. Single family homes, multifamily homes, they were all needed to support kind of the railroad economy, kind of the commercial economy, the student economy. You needed that housing. And even if you look at single family homes, like I've looked at a lot of the census data associated with the housing in Oneonta. My own house is currently a single family home, but in 1926, it had a family living in it and 3 boarders from the normal school. So you've got a single family home, but they also had 3 students living with them as full-time boarders. The zoning code currently would not allow that use, but we see that use all across Oneonta, historically speaking. So even these single family homes historically were being used as boarding houses, not only for students, but also for railroad workers and other employees of some of the more commercial uses that we saw on Market Street and on Main Street. So historically, we have a lot of context that these neighborhoods were much more kind of mixed than they are today.
So you talk about the various economies that Oneonta has enjoyed, and you referenced the college rental market as being, I guess, the last in a succession there. Can you talk a little bit about how the nature of that rental market has impacted the availability and the affordability of homes?
Yeah, so I mean, what we've seen with SUNY Oneonta, after the decline of the railroads, the normal school became kind of the economy. So that was kind of the last, it becomes SUNY Oneonta. They build this awesome, mid-mod campus up on the hill. It becomes like a driving economy in Oneonta. And what you see is a change in the type of tenant and the type of rental that you were kind of using. Like previously you had a model where a family might own a house and they might have a couple boarders, and that model kind of changes as SUNY Oneonta becomes SUNY Oneonta. And it's partially because there is a housing crunch. Even at that point, you need housing for students, and it becomes a very lucrative market to purchase homes and just rent to students. So you move away from the border to a student-driven, I own a house, I rent it out to a number of students, they live there. And that kind of changes the nature of the neighborhood, because you move away from, we'll just call them the Joneses with their kids, with this kind of extra kid, to the Joneses don't live there, and it's a house with 3 to 7 kids living in it. And that's kind of a change in the market, and it's a change in the neighborhood. And that does kind of alter what the market will support as far as what the costs of rent are, how those rents impact people looking to buy, looking to rent. And part of that is just a result of a lack of housing, because if you have a lot of zoning restrictions, you're not building units. So a house that can potentially have 3 college students in it now, you can't make it into a duplex. You can't make it into a 3-unit house. So it crunches the actual housing stock, which also pushes the cost higher for the available housing that is there. And we've seen that everywhere. I mean, we've seen that not just in Oneonta, but places like Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, like where there's a high demand, San Francisco, where there's a high demand for housing. The restriction of units, the restrictions on the ability to construct units just drives that price. So whether it's college students, whether it's Airbnb rentals, whether it's new tech workers, like it's just a thing that goes. You find a housing market, I can find you something crunching it.
And of course, what I've been telling folks who listen to this podcast is that there is something of a silver lining to what otherwise might be a dark cloud relative to our demographic challenges. And that's that model that we're dealing with and have been dealing with for the last 50-something or other years, the student housing-driven economy, is going through a paradigm shift. You see that as well?
Yeah, I mean, the New York Times sees that as well. I mean, that is the enrollment cliff is something that's impacting college towns and universities and all across the country. I mean, small liberal arts colleges across the country have been facing it. They were hitting it before universities like SUNY were facing it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a thing. But I would also say, like, making housing available, building units of housing will always outpace declining demographic. So part of why we have a crunch on housing is because we limit the number of units that can be built, and historically we have not built housing to support the demand. If you build housing units, you will reduce the number of taken housing units. So if you have this market where we see that there's a demand for housing, if you meet that demand, eventually the college does not have an infinite enrollment. So that's kind of part of the problem is we've really focused, like many communities historically, we've really focused on the idea that we need single family neighborhoods and that they should all be that way, and like mixed housing is bad. And that has just fed into this restriction and this reduction of available units for rent to non-college students.
Sure. So we come right back to zoning. So another way we can ensure control of our destiny in terms of both density and appearance is through our code, right?
Correct.
So how have we used that? How have you been using that? Specifically, I'm thinking of the form-based code that you put together over the course of, it might have taken you a day or two.
Yeah. So basically, the answer to a lot of the issues with zoning has come through new models like the form-based code, smart growth, the Congress for the New Urbanism. There's a big push in planning right now to create zoning ordinances that are focused on what things look like, how they interact with the population, and not so much what type of uses go on in them. So what you might see is like a house that looks like a single family home from the outside. It might have a garage. It's got, a front door, a back door. It looks just like a single family home, but it's laid out as, a 5-unit apartment house. The importance of the form-based code and the direction that most form-based codes take is that we care more about what something looks like and how it interacts with its surrounding property than we do about how many people live in it or how many units are in it, or the use of the land becomes secondary to how that use and how that form interacts with the rest of the surrounding parcels. Mm-hmm. So what you're getting away from is like a 6-story apartment building smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood of 2- and 3-story houses. Mm-hmm. That's what we're getting away from. And we're looking to, you're kind of looking to integrate maybe higher density residential into places kind of in a way that doesn't impact the rest of them. Like my own street, like I said, it's built that way. Mm-hmm. If you walk down my street, you see what appear to be a street of single family homes. But what you'll find out is that there's just as many 4, 3, 2-unit houses as there are single family homes. But you would just never know that from the outside.
Mm-hmm. We've been speaking with Stephen Yerly, Code Enforcement Officer here in the city of Oneonta. Going to take a short break and we'll come right back to our interview and talk a little bit about the 7 to save.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to learn more and support Oneonta, visit exploreoneonta.com. That's exploreoneonta.com.
So we're talking with Stephen Yerly, the Code Enforcement Officer in the city of Oneonta. And Steve, getting back to the form-based code, the form-based code will mean that new buildings will echo the aesthetic of the historic part of our downtown, generally speaking. So that's a fair assessment? That's a fair...
Yeah.
So in your creation of that form-based code, you had a vision of what Oneonta might look like moving into its future, but also you had an appreciation of what Oneonta looked like in its best days of its past. Fair to say that you're an historic preservationist?
Yeah, I think that, so academically I'm trained in historic preservation. My interest in planning is secondarily focused in historic preservation. What I think a lot of people miss on that is like we're kind of all historic preservationists. I mean, people that choose to kind of invest in Oneonta's downtown, the people that live in Oneonta's downtown, the people that interact with it, we all want to see it successful. I mean, we are all invested in this place just like everyone before us was invested in this place. So yeah, I mean, like we kind of get the bad rap of, deciding who gets what house color, paint, windows, But in the end, like a lot of that is made to protect what the people that came before us built. I mean, we're appreciating the investment that was made by anyone that built a building in downtown Oneonta. Like our history is tied directly to our future, and that's how it's always been. So yeah, I mean, I would say that broadly I'm a historic preservationist as much as anybody else should be.
And the Preservation League of New York has a similar commitment, and it has a program called the 7 to Save, which not coincidentally you were responsible for Oneonta's selection as one of those 7. So what does that mean, and how did that come about?
So the 7 to Save program, it's every 2 years they basically take communities, you apply, and they take communities all across New York State that have historic sites that are threatened or face some sort of imminent threat. Which Oneonta's downtown is vibrant. It's a place that people want to be. Unfortunately, it's also a place that is threatened in its own way. I mean, when we look at places like downtown Oneonta, like many places in upstate New York, we have buildings they need repaired. We have vacant buildings. We have places that are really, really important that we just need a little bit of boost to get somewhere with. So the intent of Oneonta's listing on the 7 to Save isn't that tomorrow we're going to wrecking ball the entire downtown.
Right.
The importance of the 7 to Save is to say, Oneonta is a place, we're a great place, and we have some great architectural and historic resources, and we want people to see it, we want people to know about it, and we want people to invest in it. And I think that we're seeing that places like Oneonta are seeing that type of investment. I mean, we've constructed a new building. We're seeing a historic structure being totally reworked that was vacant into, viable residential units. I mean, we are seeing fruit from that kind of labor of love. So yeah, I mean, 7 to Save it's great. There's some great sites on it, and we're one of them. So just check it out. I mean, it's really, really a great plan. You can see all kinds of cool places across New York State.
Yeah, the 7 to Save specifically. Can you envision any way that program might help us preserve and promote that aspect of the city, the historic value of our buildings? And how do you see that working?
So, I mean, already with 7 to Save, we had an Instagram takeover where we listed all kinds of cool sites. I mean, we did indoor tours, outdoor tours. I mean, we literally had an entire day where Preservation League's Instagram was just Oneonta, New York. We have engaged with them with some technical assistance for a couple grants. They have written letters of support for a large Restore New York grant that we actually were awarded for a historic property in our downtown historic district. And they are actively kind of going up to bat for us as we work to get a certified local government program, which allows us to access more grant funding. They also partnered with us to do a historic resources survey of the entire city. So we were getting a lot. I mean, it's just another person telling the world how great Oneonta is. It's another place saying, hey, come to Oneonta, come see it.
Yeah, and that's what we need. As you are strategizing our way from the past into the present, you have a vision, you have your own vision of what the hoped for expansion of the downtown footprint might look like and what Oneonta might look like in the future. And I wonder if you could share that with me.
So not only am I the code officer, but I'm also a certified planner. So I'm Steve Yerly, AICP, if you want to throw out the official professional title. But what we've seen in Oneonta is what many upstate communities saw with urban renewal. Planners came in and said, hey, we've got this great idea. Let's bulldoze everything and we'll start all over again. And most of what we're doing in Oneonta is figuring out how to put all that stuff back. So I hate to keep referencing, historical and back when things were a certain way, but what the broad or what the kind of larger planning community is doing across America, not just in New York and not just in Oneonta, is we're looking at how we messed up, and we're kind of taking ownership of it, and we're saying we need to make places that are walkable. We need to make places that have amenities for everyone. We need to make places that are sustainable and that are, include like social justice issues, and we need to make places that serve like the community as a whole. And I think downtown Oneonta and Oneonta, generally, not just our downtown historic district, we are looking at a place that needs to have a purpose for existing in the next 100 years. So we need to be a place that says we have housing, we have employment, we have amenities that people want, and we need to do that in a way that is accessible, which is, walkable, which is a place that you can walk from your house on Center Street, which is an adjacent residential zone in our city, to downtown, and you can buy a cup of coffee and maybe go to your doctor and maybe get lunch. And after all that's done, you can maybe shop. Like, that's what the planning world is doing, and that's what Oneonta has to do moving forward. We have to be, I say it a million times, people don't go on vacations to take pictures of parking lots and, Moe's Burrito and Panera Bread. Like, those are not sustainable places, and they're not places that are going to exist in 50 years. I mean, that is not what people want. And I'm committed to that. So if I'm wrong,
we don't think you're wrong. I'm constantly reminded when I speak with other mayors who had the same brilliant minds tearing apart their cities 70 years ago now, is it?
Yes.
Something like that, 50, 70 years ago. And in Oneonta's case, the wrecking ball spared the better part of our city, the downtown. Yes. And thank God.
Right.
And people are constantly complimenting us on the fact that we have this beautiful downtown. Well, we have this beautiful downtown because folks left it alone. Right. And you have buildings that could use a little TLC, no doubt, but the basic structure, the historic structures are still there. And then with the expansion of new building and buildings that are following a form-based code so they feel kind of a place, something where, in my mind's eye, certainly in Oneonta, we've learned from the mistakes of the past.
Yes. I mean, the beauty of, and I think the importance of modern planning is we have come to realize that we made mistakes. And in that realization, we've said, how do we start to put these places back together? And I think part of that has come from the concept that we do kind of, the planning process is done from what the community wants. When people see, when we drafted our comprehensive plan, we said, what do you want? Well, we want walkability. We want places that you want to be. Like I said, no one goes into a Walmart parking lot and says, man, I'm in a place. I love this. No one pulls into a strip mall and goes, man, this is a place that I wanted to see before I died. Right. That's not what the world is. And if anyone's honest with themselves, they'll admit that.
Sure.
That's why you go on vacation.
Right. And even as our downtowns have gone through, all of the changes that they've gone through in the last 50 years that I've been aware of this particular downtown, where the retail sector was strong. It was where you went for your staples, for your suits and your shoes and your this and your that. And then that moved to the box stores and the malls and so forth. And now, of course, they're struggling because Amazon and other digital services have taken their market. But in the meantime, so you come back to the basic structure that you're still left with of your downtown, your historic nature of your downtown, and you begin to move toward more entertainment and engagement aspects of the shopping experience. So niche shopping and restaurants and things that are more in keeping with someone enjoying the browse, essentially, of your downtown. That's that you're inviting people in because it's a nice place you want to be in.
Yeah, I mean that's so. I'm not going to shamelessly plug a downtown business right there. So there's a store on Main Street called Serenity Hobbies here in Oneonta. They sell gaming supplies and all kinds of fun stuff. Could I buy all of that stuff on Amazon, or could I order every gaming thing I would ever need on the internet? Oh yeah, I could, and it would be delivered to my front door. But what Amazon can't deliver to me is a place to play games and a place to hang out and a place to have snacks and talk to other people. And that's why places like downtown Oneonta will survive, where places like Walmart eventually, you'll never outcompete. You'll never be able to surpass Amazon in your ability to ship stuff to people's houses. Mm-hmm. But what Amazon cannot compete with is human interaction and things that you can't just bulk order.
Right.
The Artisans Guild in downtown Oneonta, they sell things that you are not just going to get because you ordered it on Amazon. Right. I mean, that is the beauty of a downtown, and that is the beauty, and that's why we need those types of places, right? Because otherwise you're just ordering stuff, it's getting dropped at your...
I've always believed that the retailers and the restaurateurs, for that matter, their businesses are personality driven, and it's the personalities of those folks who've invested their lives, frankly, in a lot of cases, in those businesses. It's those personalities that bring you to those businesses, and it's the personalities that are presented by people people who built these buildings that surround us 150 years ago in many cases, that have informed our downtown and that have invested themselves in your life.
Right.
So we're very glad that we have you invested in that and in the city. Stephen Yerly, Code Enforcement for the City of Oneonta, and with Judy Pangman, who will get up here one of these days, Oneonta's Director of Community Development, kind of the co-head of our Planning and Development Department. You're doing great work, Steve.
Thanks.
And that just about does it for this edition of the Hill City Gambit. I'm the mayor of the city of Oneonta, Mark Drenick. I invite you to join us again in just a couple of weeks when our next podcast drops. Till then, I hope you'll find some time to take a look at our website, exploreoneonta.com.
Hello, I'm Carrie Harrington. Thanks for your time and for learning all about our city. Special thanks to the citizens of Oneonta and all who have made the Hill City Gambit possible. We hope to see you for our next episode. Take care, everybody.